Okay, just an important announcement before starting with this debate. We are going to close the vote. So if any member party has not voted yet, this is the moment, otherwise the vote for the presidency will be closed. So please bring out your ballot paper so that we can close the vote. And now I'm calling for the next debate, please. Join me on the stage. Minister Ylva Johansson from Sweden. Yes, I see. Karl-Heinz Lambertz, please join us. Corina Cretu, Tuulia Pitkanen, Luca Visentini, Pedro Marques. Hello, Corina. Welcome. Take a seat. Hello. Yes, hi, very good. Luca, hi.
Okay.
Can I call everyone, please, to take back your seat? Please. I would like to start with this next panel. Please, comrades, take back your seat. Okay. So now we are ending this first day of the Congress. Not totally ending, but ending with the discussion on the resolution. And we will now, after this interesting discussion on migration, on democracy and the challenges that we have, and then this very interesting panel on the international issue, go for a lot of very important policies. Environment, a sustainable Europe, a social Europe, a progressive economy, and how we make the case of young people progress in Europe. And we have here a very interesting panel that I would like to present, starting with Minister Pedro Marques from Portugal, that is very active in our network as a PES of the cohesion policy. So that's very important. Thank you, Pedro, for being with us. We have Ylva Johansson, that is also a prominent minister active in our EBSCO, Employment and Social Affairs Ministers Working Group, together with Nicolas Schmidt. Thank you, Ylva, for joining us. And of course, we also, as Anne, hope that you will continue in the government of Stefan Löfven. We have Corina Cretu, who is our Commissioner for Cohesion Policy, so also an important topic. Karl-Heinz Lambertz, the President of the Committee of Region. Then Tuulia Pitkanen, the Secretary General of the Young European Socialists, yes, and Luca Visentini, the Secretary General of ETUC, the European Trade Union Confederation, and we are hoping, and he's on his way from the airport, to have very soon also Olivier Faure, who's the Premier Secrétaire of the French Socialist Party. So he should arrive any minute. So, as we are running short of time, I will start now with the questions for the panelists. It's an important debate. As I said, it's social and economic and environmental issues. For us as socialists, as it has been explained several times in the debate, we don't oppose this issue one to the other. We want to have a comprehensive policies. We want to have an holistic policy, an holistic approach to make sure that all Europe, the Europe we want, will be a fair Europe. A fair Europe for everyone, not just for the money, not just for the few, for the many, so that we're making sure that everyone can enjoy a dignity and a dignified life. I would like to ask my first question to Minister Johansson, Ylva. We know that Sweden is a model in terms of social protection, welfare state, And so I would be very direct because we know that, and the previous panel has mentioned it, we are facing many challenges. Globalization, climate change, the digital revolution. So how do you see, what is your answer to all people, to all voters, to European citizens on how Europe should tackle this challenge that we are facing?
Thank you. I think there are many dimensions of your question, but let me start with one reflection. We are almost all of us facing nationalist, racist, conservative, right-wing extremist, also fascist movements in our countries. And they are characterized by three things. First, everything is hopeless and the future is dark. Second, there is someone to blame, mostly often immigrants, but it can also be women or LGBT persons or something else. And third, there's no truth. Everything is fake news. And I think it's important to realize this threat. And I recently have election campaign in Sweden, and when I was out arguing in campaigning, there was not so much debate about different solutions. The big debate was about, is it possible at all to change and form the future by politics? So when I said, this is the Social Democratic program, we would like to do this and this, and people said, oh, yes. But when I say it's possible for us to solve the problems we have and the challenges we have with immigrations, to have them integrated into society, it's possible for us to fight unemployment, it's possible for us to fight gaps between people, then people go bananas, no, it's not possible, you can't say that. So this is, I think, important that we face and that we have to fight. Politics, policy make difference. And if people don't think that, they're not interested in the kind of solutions that we are presenting. Second, I think also that it's important for us as a European movement to understand that we also have some success during the last years. It's only 1 year ago since we have all head of states and prime ministers in Gothenburg agreeing on a social summit, agreeing on the social pillar. This was a real big success for our family. And I think we now need to come further how we can really implement the social pillar. And in my opinion, it will be a big mistake if we are all only looking at the European level to implement the European social pillar. Because the European budget, European legislation will never ever be that strong so that we can really make that kind of difference that's necessary on the ground for real people. We have to have the pressure and the responsibility of member states. And I think we should find a mechanism to make it compulsory for member states to actually show a social action plan, how they are going to implement the social pillar in their country, taking into account all the stakeholders that are necessary, and they could be different from country to country. But I think it would be a big mistake for our family if we are leaving the implementation of the social pillar only to the Commission and the Parliament. It has to be done through the stakeholders on the national level. I think this is very important. To answer your question about how we can also, from the Swedish example, we have strong social partners, we have strong unions in Sweden. 90% of the labour market is covered by collective agreements.
Thank you.
And the unions, they don't want legislation. They would like to be able to form the regulation by themselves through collective bargaining and through collective agreements. And that has been a really success story in my country, and it's very important for us to continue on that way. For example, we received more refugees than I think any other European countries according to our population during the crisis in 2014-2015. And the social partners stepped up and came to me as Minister for Employment saying, we would like to cooperate on this. We can help you. We find a common solution how we can integrate newcomers into the labor market. They also set up their own system for helping people that lose their job to find a new job, and it's quite successful. So from the Swedish perspective, to rely on the strength of social partners and to really rely on unions that can protect their members and the Swedish workers has been a success model for Sweden that we really would like to continue.
Thank you very much, Ylva, and you give me really the good opportunity to directly turn myself to Luca, because you were mentioning the social partners and how we need to have strong unions to promote workers' rights in Sweden, but also in Europe. So I will ask Luca. Luca, about the European Pillar of Social Rights, which is a big achievement, I mean, promoted by the Swedish government and Stefan Löfven, but also a success from all our family, ministers, parties, S&D group. What are now the next steps that we should do to make this European Pillar of Social Rights a priority, and what should be our key priorities in the coming months? Luca.
Thank you, Yonnec, and good afternoon to everybody. Well, before coming to the pillar, let me give you some hints about what we are struggling with workers. The European trade union movement and the European socialist movement are part of the same family. And as members of the same family, we have to tell to each other the truth. We have investigated what our members have done in the recent elections. In Sweden, in Germany, regional elections, in Italy, national elections, and other countries. And what comes out from our surveys, our members, of course, have interviewed and asked their members. We are not talking about general workers, we are talking about trade union members. What comes out from this investigation is that 1/3 of the trade union members in Europe voted for far-right, populist, nationalistic and xenophobic parties. 1/3 of the trade union members. The second third of the trade union members didn't go to the polls. They didn't vote at all. And there is a 1/3 left that are still voting for traditional democratic parties, mainly the progressives. Well, this result of our investigation put to all of us, the socialist movement, the trade union movement, an incredible challenge. And the challenge is, what should we do to regain the trust of these people, of the working people of Europe? Because we have to ask ourselves why they have abandoned us. Why they don't trust us any longer. What's the problem? Is really migrants coming to our countries to steal our jobs? We don't think so. There are other problems behind all that, and these are exactly the problems that the European Pillar of Social Rights, Social Europe, a different European economic and social strategy should address. But the second truth we should tell to each other is that it's not with slogans like more democracy, more tolerance, more solidarity, social Europe, the European Pillar of Social Rights, that we can win this battle. Because our people don't understand what we are talking about. This is really political and also trade union jargon. I'm sorry to say that. We are profoundly convinced that these are the solutions, but we have to transform these slogans into something that people can understand. What is what people can understand? People can understand that we, the progressives, are able to provide them with decent and quality jobs. That every single young person in Europe will have an opportunity not to have to get any kind of job, a decent and quality job. And to do that, we have to deeply change the economic model that has been implemented so far in the last couple of decades. And unfortunately, we have also been part of this implementation. We have also been part of the implementation of the neoliberal macroeconomic model in the last couple of decades. So we need to change. We need to make sure that our people can understand that the progressives and the trade unions are able to build up an economy that serves the interest of people, that is sustainable and fair towards them and able, through investment, internal demand, etc., to create better jobs for everybody. The second message we have to transform our rhetoric into is that we need to provide people with better wages. With better wages is a very simple element if you want, but if you analyze what happened for wages of people, their purchasing power, their possibility to have a decent life in the last couple of decades, it's a disaster. Everybody has lost at least 30% of their real wages in the last decade during the austerity measures. And this is the problem. If we are not able to convince our people that politicians and trade unions will be able to increase their wages significantly, this will be impossible that we can convince them to vote for you and to vote for us in our social elections. And to increase wages of people, there is only one thing we can do. The name of this thing is collective bargaining, trade union power, the capacity for trade unions to deliver negotiations that can really improve the condition of people. Third element is the so-called just transition. What does it mean? It means that we are facing globalization, trade policy. Paul Magnet was very eloquent on that. We face digitalization, automation, climate change, incredible disruption in people's job. We need to make sure that people feel that since we cannot oppose these transformations, we are able to manage them. And we are able to make sure that nobody will be left behind. This needs policy, rules, rights, and money. A lot of money to make sure that we accompany this change in the future. And fourth and last, but most important element, and here I come back to your question to conclude, is of course how we can build up a Europe that protects. What does it mean protects? Protects doesn't mean simply to close the borders. It doesn't mean protect people from the arrival of migrants. It doesn't mean protecting people through security and defense. Protects means recreating, rebuilding up our social model. It was our proudness to have the best social model in the world. This social model has been destroyed. Destroyed by us in 10 years of austerity. This should be the top priority. Through the social pillar, through social justice, through social Europe, how to recreate an effective and really inclusive and fair social model for people. This must be our common battle. On this we can engage for the elections, because you know we have also the task and the responsibility as trade unions to convince our workers, our members, to go to vote in the elections. We will organize massive demonstrations and initiatives to convince our people to go to vote and to vote for the progressives. But for this to happen, we need to put in place two fundamental actions. The first one is that in your manifesto, in our manifesto, these concrete elements should be there. People have to understand that we are serious and we can really regain their trust because we are able to provide them with concrete results. And the second element is, and here I come back to what Ylva was saying, we need to make sure that from now to March, not May, from now to March, the European Pillar of Social Rights is implemented through European legislation and through national legislation and social dialogue. We have, at the moment, 13 legislative initiatives going on at the European level. This initiative, in the social field, of course, these initiatives are establishing new rights and extending rights to precarious and non-standard workers. I appeal to all the socialist, social democratic governments, even if the social democrats are in coalition with others, please make your best to make sure that these legislative initiatives are delivered before the European elections. They are massively at risk because there are the conservative and far-right governments that are trying to destroy the European Pillar of Social Rights that we have proclaimed in Gothenburg 1 year ago. It's our responsibility again to make sure that this pillar is implemented through real legislation, through real rights, through real social protection systems. If we win this battle in terms of action, then we can go all together to the European elections and make sure that our people will understand that we are serious and able to implement our policy. This is our challenge and we can win it together.
Thank you very much, Luca. Surely we have heard your call and we will fight together to make this happen. We also know that we have to make this paradigm shift and to have a new economic approach, and therefore I would like to have a warm applause to Paul Rasmussen, please, because of the great report that he has done on the sustainable equality that I invite you all to read, because it's a very good document promoting this new approach and to also deliver concrete solutions for the next European election. So thank you very much, Paul, for the great job that you have been doing with this report, together with many other people that are in the room. Thank you, Paul. And so I would like to turn now to, Luca has mentioned that we have to fight to regain the vote of workers. But I want to know also about young people. And I'm turning myself to Tuulia. Tell us, after the youth guarantee that we as a family have been developing, have been promoting, and it's millions of young people that have been benefiting of the youth guarantee, but what do you think about it? What should we do? And what would be the next step of our family to go and get the vote of young people and to have their confidence also? Tuulia.
Thank you very much. So, the youth guarantee, well, I assume most of you are familiar with it. So, the idea of youth guarantee put forward by also the Young European Socialists and our family, the idea is to guarantee for anybody who is a young person who gets unemployed that within a certain period, like 4 months, you are guaranteed to get placed in education, a job or a traineeship in order to cut the youth unemployment before it even begins, because it has a very long-term consequences if you are unemployed in the beginning of your career. It will change your whole career, and it's very hard to catch up afterwards if you graduate and end up being unemployed for a while. It has been a very successful initiative, and it's still not completely implemented in many areas, so it's very important that we keep up the fight for this initiative, definitely. I'm thinking about this question. I would still go even more back to basics when I think like what would be like the one concrete thing that we could do in this question, and I would say free education. This is a goal that's in the heart of social democracy, of socialism. It has been in our manifestos for years, I would say. However, we still don't have free education in the higher level or even in the secondary level all over Europe. And I think this is actually a very important point, and that we shouldn't start to think of something new and innovative, new programs or sets of agenda before we have achieved this goal, because it's in the heart of it. Most importantly, it's important that the education is free, that it's accessible in spite of your social class, and that it's also secular and public. And I think that these are like the points that we should really put on the agenda in our policy in order to also regain the trust of our voters. Why education is so important is that because education is in the heart of social mobility. So in my country, in Finland, we have one of the highest levels of social mobility, and we also have a free education. But in spite of this, we can still very clearly see that the education background of your parents defines your level of education, even in a very equal country in a European context. And it's even worse when we go to countries where you still have to pay for your education. This is a question of social mobility, of freedom of choice, and of class, and I think that this is at the heart of it. And also, this is even not enough. So first of all, we have to fight for free education in all of the levels for everybody. But second of all, we also have to renew the content of our educational systems. In a couple of decades, the jobs that we know now are all gone. Not all gone, but most of them will be gone. They will be replaced with artificial intelligence and with robotization. And this is a development that will be very hard for us to stop, and I don't even think that we should stop this development. We have to find solutions for the negative side effects of it instead. And when we are renewing the content of the education, the most important thing is to concentrate on issues that cannot be so easily replaced, let's say, with the robotization and with artificial intelligence. There are already, the research says that there are 3 things that are something that will be, even in the future, very hard to replace with automatization. And these themes are empathy and communication, very hard to replace. Also critical thinking and creativity. These three measures have to be put into the heart of the new education system, because it's the only way how we can still survive in the future and create the new forms of jobs, and to have a new generations of young people who have the capacity to answer to the changing jobs, the changing economy, and by putting these two together, the free education and also the renewal of education, I think this is the only way we can go forward from here.
Thank you very much, Tuulia. Thank you for raising this important issue of education, to have critical citizens, because that's what we are raising, to have critical citizens, but also skilled workers, so it's very important that we continue with this fight. I would like to welcome Olivier Faure, the Premier Secretary du Parti Socialiste. Thank you, Olivier, for joining us at this debate. And now I will turn to Corina, because we have been discussing now about the state of play in Europe, but also about the inequality that we have in Europe. I mean, poverty, inequality between East, West, North, South. We know that we have important challenges to succeed with a sustainable development, but also to make sure that our cohesion policy will work. And you are the Commissioner for Cohesion Policy, so if you could tell us also what are the actions that we have to do, because that's really a main challenge, that we have to show the unity of Europe, that Europe is working for everyone, and that we want to have concrete convergence, and of course upward convergence, and better living standards for all citizens in Europe, and the Commission, and I mean the cohesion policy and the discussion that we have about the European budget is so important. So the floor is yours to tell us our priority there.
Thank you to all of you. I'm delighted to be here, and I really hope that our Congress could be a turning point in our progressive family. And as you said, of course, we are away only a few months from European elections, and the European political landscape has never been so unstable. And one of the reasons is what you said, Yonnec, about social and territorial inequalities that still exist. And we see very much that where we have citizens living in the remote areas, in the urban deprived areas, or in poor countries, or in regions where unemployment was always high. There is a seeds for populism, and we have to have tailor-made approach. That's why as a Commissioner for Regional Policy, I know very well how much we invested together, because we are working hand in hand with the group, with the Committee of the Regions, with the European Parliament, to have this convergence and to help member states to improve the life of the people through infrastructure, health infrastructure, education. The problem is that we are not visible enough. According with our studies, more than 70% of the population, when they go into the hospital, modernized, or into the highway, or to the highway, they don't know that these are European money, European solidarity in putting in their countries, especially in Eastern European countries. We invested billions to have this convergence. So I really hope that we will succeed to defend this European project and to be hand in hand. We have here, we know that we work, for instance, on migrants, on these challenges. We put together ERDF funds with social funds in all member states who are in this situation. And being here in the country of Mario Soares and having Pedro Marques, with whom we are working so hard together, I would like to come back to the ideas of the founding father of this European project. Mario Soares was not only the great political man who brought democracy in Portugal, but also he fought for fighting poverty. He fought for this solidarity, which is less and less in this European project, and we have to fight for these values and these principles which made this unique project that we have on our planet, European project, to fight populism and to improve the life of the people, to go closer to the citizens, to explain what we do, because as Luca said, We need money, it is true, but money is not everything. We invest money and sometimes people do not know what we are doing. And also I appeal to you to go to your member states, to your governments, because we really need to have this financial agreement for the budget 2021-2027 until European elections. Otherwise, according with our studies, 100,000 projects in all member states will be in danger to not be possible to be finished with EU money, and this is again will feed the populism because we don't adopt the legislation in time. So let's take action, let's be inspired, and let's go closer to the citizens. I think this is a key for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corina. I turn myself now to Pedro. Pedro, we have been discussing about it. For us, the European project, it's a project of solidarity, clearly, a project of peace, a project of democracy, but also a project of convergence. So tell us, also you here as minister in Portugal, and we know that you are a successful government, but how we could do that at the European level to bring more convergence in this European continent for all our citizens.
Thank you so much, Yonnec. Let me start by welcoming you everybody to Lisbon. It's great to have you here. Convergence is indeed a must in our European project. We have been successful here in our country in internal convergence, but also in important factors for convergence with Europe. But also we have been struck by a huge crisis, as you know, and it was really difficult to explain to the citizens that Europe was working throughout this crisis. And it's still difficult to explain in many countries in Europe that Europe is working or that this economic model is working for sure. I was asked to talk a bit about the European Monetary Union, the deepening of the European Monetary Union, and we need obviously to do so. We need to deepen this monetary union. We need new instruments, and some steps have been gone through and they are positive, but we need more. We need the backstop. We need more instruments at the European stabilization mechanism, but we need also the fiscal capacity. We need stabilization in Europe for the crisis, for the short-term crisis. And that's something that we are lacking. We are taking steps, but so many times these are short steps, and we should do more. And that's something that I really want to stress, which is that we are working for the monetary union. We are doing so much in the economic front, but we need to do so much more in the social front. And it has been referred here today. We need to bring back the coalition with the middle classes, with the citizens. That still is the European social model. We have been discussing, so we should discuss so much more the bringing back our European social model. It worked for decades in Europe. It should continue to work. And that should be one of the main issues, one of the main features of our manifesto, to bring back the coalition with European citizens, and that coalition should be brought back by the European socialists, by the socialists and Democrats. We need to cope economic growth with tackling inequalities. And we have done it successfully in the past, and that was done through the European social model. So let's bring that back. Our societies are aging, and we need social policy. We need training, we need social services, we need income, better income distribution, and that may come again through European social model, a modernized European social model to be more able to cope with the situation in the 21st century. So let's bring our societies together, let's bring our citizens together again, and that has to be done by us, by the European socialists, with concrete measures that change people's life. That is what happened in my country. The success of this government is about the results, the concrete results in people's lives. We have created a lot of jobs in this country these last few years. We have improved people's incomes, also through minimum salaries, through better labor policy, through much better social policy. Concrete results, that's what the citizens expect from us, and that should be the basis of our coalition for the next elections. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to Lisbon.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for this really done amazing speech. And I will turn myself now to Olivier. Merci de nous rejoindre, Olivier.
Thank you very much for joining us, Olivier. We're both French speakers, so I'll speak French to you. Now, you're here as the first secretary of the French Socialist Party. We're aware of the current situation in France, the issue with the yellow jackets. They're, of course, the expression of the people's anger. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that, or how to regain the trust of our citizens and have a fairer Europe with more solidarity in the current context when we see the anger that it's caused. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear friends, comrades, I've just arrived from Paris. I was still there a few hours ago, standing at a roundabout with people making up the movement, now known as the Yellow Jacket movement. People showing their anger. That anger could have been foreseen, but no one saw this movement coming. 18 months ago, France elected a president that was seen by the whole of Europe as the embodiment of a renovation of social democracy. And indeed, the European anthem rung out in front of the Louvre, where he was sworn in as president. And 18 months on, 8 out of 10 French citizens are supporting a movement that is completely hostile to that president. So what's happened here? This president, many of us here saw him as perhaps a hope for the European Union. What happened to this president who was applauded as the European anthem played? What's happened to this president who is shunned and criticized, who is France's most unpopular president ever, 18 months into his term? Tomorrow, there'll be a survey published in our national newspapers. For the upcoming European elections, 41% of France, 41% of French citizens say that they're ready and willing to vote for a party list made up of yellow jacket members. And that's proof of how broad the movement is. What's happening on these roundabouts, at these intersections, these blockades? There are women and men that we ought to be representing. They are the embodiment of France living just above the minimum wage. The lower middle classes, who for so long has waited for a message from the left, a message that is not coming. People who no longer see themselves reflected in we, the left, who see no expression of their lives in political life. Look at La France Insoumise of Mélenchon. Look at the far right of Marine Le Pen. They've swept people up. But above and beyond all of this, what they want is to no longer be faced with scorn. That's what they keep repeating day after day. They can see that they're facing class war. They feel that the European Union has no interest in raising them up and improving their lives, that the European Union is going on without them. So what are we to be saying at the next elections? We ought to be saying that there is an alternative to this too liberal Europe, the Trojan War of globalized neoliberalism. We ought to say there is an alternative, the alternative put forward by the European Social Democrats, that we are still relevant to their lives, that we still speak to them. We have a message for these people scraping together a living when all they want is justice and equality. These people who want France to take everyone into account, not just the wealthiest, not just the few, but for the many, while these people continue to scrimp and save and sacrifice. What do they want for this issue of equality, environmentalism in Europe? They want to see a fair energy transition, something that's going to be carried forward by everyone. That's what the Yellow Jackets have been said. Now I can see that my time is coming to an end, but here is what I have to say today. What's happening in France today will happen in the rest of Europe tomorrow. This movement is not localized and limited to France. The anger expressed within this movement is infectious. It will spread. So here, there are two possibilities for the movement. Either they end up in the hands of the far right and the populists, because these are the people brandishing that message, or we still have the ability to respond to what these people are clamoring for. Perhaps because deeply What they're asking for is justice and equality. They have social demands. And if we can respond to that, they will come back to us. So it's all up to us. It's in our hands. We have a choice to make. And we have a clear message to broadcast to these people in this Congress. That's what I hope to do with you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier. Merci pour cette présentation de la situation en France, mais qui n'est pas uniquement limitée à la France.
Thank you very much for this introduction to what's going on in France. We know that this is not limited to France. The same thing is starting to take place in Belgium, and we know people want to see more tax justice, more quality work, more quality jobs to respond to all of these needs. We'll now be hearing from Karl-Heinz Lambertz from the Committee of the Regions, a significant European institutions, and many of us here are also indirectly active in this committee. Our family is very strong on the local level, and the Committee of the Regions is the expression of that. We have mayors of big capitals, of big cities, socialists in Europe. So we'll now hand over to Karl-Heinz to tell us about what's going on in the regions for our citizens a few months out from the elections. Thank you. We have many reasons to be proud of what the socialist movement has achieved in Europe. But nonetheless, a quarter of the population is still living under the poverty line. That's something we haven't been able to halt. And the fact that in Europe there are still quality jobs missing, the fact that not everyone has a safe place to live, the fact that young people are having to depend on their parents rather than getting a quality job that corresponds to their skills. There are many people who are unable to support themselves because of the lack of quality work. That's what we're facing here. It's not just about solving issues in one country. We must work together across Europe as a broad front. But the Europe I'm talking about isn't just Strasbourg, Luxembourg or Brussels. Quite the contrary. The Europe where we can make gains, where we can succeed, are the villages, the local towns, the regions and the cities of Europe. That is where our victory can be set out, where we meet citizens and see what their day-to-day lives are. That's where we do politics, and we've been successful in that for a long time. So let's get back to the local level. Let's work with our local and regional elected people to see how we can move things forward in Europe, not for something happening elsewhere, but for what's happening right here in our continent. We have to convince citizens in their head, in their hearts, and I would say in their gut, that Europe is the right path forward and that socialists are the right way to get going on that path.
Thank you very much, Karl-Heinz, and I would like to thank all the panelists for their very inspiring and motivating speech that they were delivering in these very important topics. I mean, sustainable Europe, a free education, education for all, the youth guarantee, a better employment, tax justice, a Eurozone, a euro that will work for everybody. Also, the better way to protect all workers, being in the digital sector or not, to protect families, to protect all citizens that are living in Europe, to make sure that they will have a better future. And that is our commitment, and that will be the reflection in our common manifesto for the European elections. So thanks again to all the panelists. Thanks very much.